my childhood.
Hello and welcome to Ruin My Childhood, the podcast where we decide if some things are better left in the past. I'm Kat.
I'm Mike.
And today we are talking about Mrs. Doubtfire.
We are, but before we talk about it, I got an announcement, honey.
What's that?
We got a new patron on Patreon.
Fancy.
His name is Jesus Rodriguez, and he is part of our executive producer tier, so we're going to be sending him a free Blu-ray that's autographed. Dustin's coming out of retirement to make some artwork for him, and it's going to be pretty good.
Dustin's a little young to be retiring.
He retired his artworks, but he's bringing the artworks back.
Right.
But yeah, Jesus, thank you so much for supporting the show. If anybody else wants to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/MDXpods and chip in $1 or $2, and we got a lot of great rewards.
Thanks, buddy.
But yeah, Mrs. Doubtfire.
On to the episode. What do you remember about Mrs. Doubtfire? Off the top of your head.
So, I mean, obviously, the plot's a pretty easy plot. Man loses his kids, pretends to be a woman. So
What's your knee-jerk reaction when someone says Mrs. Doubtfire to you?
Hello!
That's mine too! Oh my god, that's hilarious. Okay, that was really loud. Sorry.
I mean, I remember we've watched this movie within the last 5 years.
Yeah, because it's a great movie.
It is. It is a great movie. I think in the last episode of the podcast when we announced it, you said, you were a little concerned about the humor not aging, some of the, like, maybe being insensitive.
Yeah, well, I think it being set in San Francisco, there might be some LGBT insensitive jokes.
Yeah, maybe. I can see that being the case in the 90s.
Right. Because if I remember, his brother was a flamboyantly gay makeup artist.
Yes, I believe so, who actually makes the disguise and the
right,
the
I think there were a couple jokes in there. But we'll see.
But other than that, I mean, I remember some of the other big things. I remember Pierce Brosnan's in it, and he plays kind of like his rival who's going after his wife or his ex-wife. I remember he does an assault on him, like he gives him like stuff that he's allergic to.
It was a run-by fruiting.
Yes. What about you? What do you remember?
All of it. I remember a lot of things about this movie. I remember that I appreciate that, spoiler alert, they don't actually end up back together at the end, which is refreshing. Because usually those family movies, the impossible happens, people, just completely abandon all of their positive mental health training and get back together for the sake of the kids, for true love. And, there's just a lot of great jokes. Robin Williams improv'd a lot of stuff on this film. But this movie is kind of like written for him. I
remember this movie pretty well, but the only other the only other actor I can see maybe doing this role in the 90s would have been like Tim Allen, but I don't think he would have been as good.
Nah.
Did you have anything else, or do you want to go into our tweets and comments and whatnot?
Let's check out those tweets.
So, for the last couple weeks, we have been asking you guys to tweet, comment, DM us about the movies that we're covering, and just kind of let us know what you think about these movies and what you remember. I've got a couple from Twitter. We got Brian Stever or Stever, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. He says, I can no longer listen to Dude Looks Like a Lady without thinking of him playing the broom guitar.
That's perfect.
And then I've got one from TD81, and it says, I've been known to quote lines like, run by fruiting the whole time, !
The whole time.
Or scallywag.
That's a great scene where where his mask comes off in the restaurant doing the Heimlich maneuver.
Right. That was one of those lines from that?
The whole time, yeah.
I don't remember
She has
that
her
line.
little freak out.
Sally Field?
Yeah.
I don't remember that one at all.
So on Instagram, Me Live to Ski said, quote, Frank, I want you to make me a woman. Other quote, honey, I'm so happy.
I think I've got one more. And then I've got one on Instagram from Mrs. Rodriguez 42217, and it says, I remember when the court liaison comes to check on his apartment, he has to put his face into a cake to mask who he really was. And I remember part of the frosting falling off his face into her coffee. Oh, and Mrs. Doubtfire fake boobs catching on fire when she tries to... That's the... Hello! part. Yeah,
yes.
that part's famous. That's first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all the comments that I've got. At least the good ones.
Okay. That's just it. That's it.
Cool.
That's all I've got.
Should we go watch the movie?
We should.
I eat wood, dinner. It tastes good, dinner. No meat, big feet. I eat wood, boom. Oh, sir, I saw it. Some angry member of the kitchen staff. Did you not tip them? Oh, the terrorists, they ran that way. It was a run by fruiting. I'll get them, sir. Don't worry.
Could you make me a woman?
Honey, I'm so happy.
I knew you'd understand.
Ah! Look at this. My first day as a woman, I'm getting hot flashes. Hello! Ah! Oh, I'm sorry to frighten you, dear. I must look like a yeti.
Oh my God! The whole time you were, the whole time!
All right, we are back and better than ever.
Okay.
What did you think?
I mean, it's Robin Williams. He hasn't really made a bad movie. At least his major movies were never really bad.
He was delightful.
I enjoyed the movie, and there was only like one or two jokes that were kind of like borderline. Actually, no,
Right.
there were a lot of like pretty raunchy jokes.
There were a lot of raunchy jokes that, completely flew over my head, even the last time we watched
Right,
this.
I didn't notice most of these, and what's funny is, so, I did a little research on it, and, this movie was directed by Chris Columbus. I somehow never knew that.
I forgot about that, and then I heard the music, and I'm like, oh, this is a Chris Columbus film.
I mean, that's definitely hit the music, but, I saw his name right when the movie started.
Any film with a really great performance from a child actor in the 90s, early 2000s is Chris Columbus.
Yeah, Home Alone, of course.
He's the master of that.
But yeah, there's some really nasty jokes. Like, you said something about cunning linguists and stuff like that, and Rumple Foreskin talking about a vibrator that is so powerful that it could chip her teeth. And he also says that his wife, as Mrs. Doubtfire, says that his wife has crabs to kind of like push Pierce Brosnan's character Stu away.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about this movie is that Chris Columbus said that he really wanted to let Robin Williams be himself in improv. And he said he had enough content for this movie to make a PG-13, rated R, and NC-17 cut.
Wow.
So he definitely got really, really vulgar.
I'd like to see that on a 25th anniversary DVD.
Right? That would be pretty interesting.
That would be awesome.
And then he also filmed everything with multiple cameras because he never really knew what Robin Williams is going to do. So you want to get multiple cameras set up so that way you can get him at multiple angles.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like, you really don't know what he's going to do. And it's awesome that, him being Chris Columbus, he has the budget to be able to do multiple cameras.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Inappropriate jokes. Oh, okay. So the first, slightly transphobic thing that I was expecting is when they go through the montage where he's basically just, crank calling Miranda.
Oh.
And pretending to be all these different people looking to fill the position of housekeeper/nanny for his kids. So he puts on all these crazy voices, which, I mean, realistically, his voices all sound like Robin Williams doing a voice.
Right.
He doesn't really do any voices that don't sound exactly like him. But then there's a joke where he's like, I don't deal with the boys because I used to be one. And she's, really grossed out by it.
Yeah. The thing of what's weird about that scene in general is, so, I mean, we really haven't summarized the movie. I don't know if we really need to summarize this movie, but
not really.
Basically, in a nutshell, he's kind of a terrible husband. His wife divorces him. He doesn't get custody, so he dresses up as a woman so he can see his kids. Pretty simple. But that scene that you're talking about, she comes over and says, hey, I'm going to hire a housekeeper/nanny. And he goes, let me see the ad. They're my kids. I deserve to see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he changes the phone number to his phone number.
Very conveniently.
Right. Or maybe he just changed the number because he wasn't getting calls. Initially, I thought, he changed the phone number to his phone number because he changes a 1 to a 4 and a 3 to an 8.
Right.
So that way she won't get the calls. And then she, like you said, he crank calls her a bunch and then poses as Mrs. Doubtfire.
Right.
So that way she's the obvious choice.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty messed up.
Oh, yeah. He gaslights the hell out of everyone in this movie. He manipulates everyone in this movie. It's terrifying. He should have gotten jail time.
So the first time that they see Mrs. Doubtfire, the children, he does a great job putting on this character who's fundamentally different than himself in the movie. But he walks up to the little girl and is like, oh, you remind me of Stuart Little. And Stuart Little's her favorite book. So immediately she's in love. And then she goes to the boy and says something about, like, oh, you look like an athlete. You're probably a soccer player. I played soccer, too. I won 3 championships.
Right.
So the boys all bought into him. And then it's super messed up. Like, 2 out of the 3 kids he, like, manipulates right away.
Right. So, I mean, overall, I kind of want to just go through this movie a little bit chronologically this time, because there are so many things that we just never questioned.
Right.
Until I kind of didn't question them until my teens. The movie starts out with this guy. He's doing voiceover work. This is great. You know, he's sticking to his guns. He has his personal convictions about portraying a bird that is promoting smoking to kids.
Right.
So, like, he quits his job. He draws the hard line. Here's the thing about, like, voiceover work, though. It's just the 1 gig at a time. Like, people don't usually have these long-running gigs, and if he
if
did...
it's a TV show.
If he did, he would already, like, know about the content of the show.
Right.
So it's kind of odd that he was there in the first place. But this dude, he quits his job, he walks off, basically, doesn't even, like, finish the episode, goes home, and spends a ton of money. He spends a butt ton of money on throwing
a butt ton.
A butt ton.
Because we don't swear on this
You won't
podcast.
let me say anything that I normally say. He spends a buttload of money on this kid's birthday party. His son is not supposed to have a birthday party because he's not getting good grades. He goes behind his wife's back, which obviously not the first time. And it's like, dude, you just spent a lot of money that you don't have, and you quit your job all on the same day, and you were gonna lie to your wife, and you were telling your kids to lie to their mother.
Yeah.
Undermining her, and then, like...
You find out it's only 4 hours.
Yeah, they have 4 hours to pull off this party. Like, how did he think that they were gonna set up for a party, have the party, clean up for the party before she came home, and then lie about it?
Also, how did he get so many kids at that party?
Right.
And they all brought gifts.
Yeah, did they not... I mean, they would have had to send out invitations to get that many kids to come, for them to also bring gifts. Plus, like, someone would have been calling the mom being like,
Well, that
Miranda, do you need me to bring dip? Like,
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Well, and then his neighbor, who is super nosy, does call the mom.
Yeah.
And it's like, how would you not know that's going to happen?
Right.
And there's just no way. And then
And why were there kids in, like, a 10-year age range in that party?
I mean,
there
back
were, like,
in the 90s
3-year-olds and then, like, teenagers.
Well, back in the 90s, people would just play outside in their neighborhood, and, like, all the kids would get together. So, like, I grew up in an apartment complex. And
That's even creepier. Come over, kids. We've got cake. Like,
no,
really?
it's a party. I
No.
grew up in an apartment
There
complex.
would have been
and there
parents
was kids
there.
all over the place, and, like,
There
were kids all over the place. I hate you. There were kids all over the place that, you know, pretty wide age group. So we would play, like, touch football, and we'd have, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, 10, 11-year-olds, and, pretty wide gamut. So I don't really
Yeah,
have a
but I
problem
mean,
with
like,
that.
no one's just gonna send their kids off without checking in to make sure everything's fine. Like, if they know him well enough to go over to his house for an impromptu party, they probably know them well enough to, like, call up Miranda and be like, yo, is this okay?
Or hang out.
Yeah, like, why were there no parents there? Just a butt ton of kids.
Yeah.
And animals. There's, like, a zoo in there. Anyway, yeah, he's a total screw-up, and I really don't feel sorry for him at all
No, I
this
think
time
she
around
was
watching
right.
it. Like, the character, he deserved everything he got, and then some. And it's, like, it's even more screwed up because obviously he was, like, failing as a husband, as a father, as a contributing member of society on all these fronts. And then he turns around and puts in this immense amount of effort to gaslight them and pose as a woman. It's disturbing on many levels.
Right. The one time I did kind of feel bad for him is they're in the courtroom, and he's finding out that he's not going to get joint custody because he doesn't have a home. He doesn't have a job. It makes sense. Like, they made the right call.
Right.
But his lawyer's kind of, like, not a very good lawyer. He's like, well, he already made his decision. But Miranda's lawyer's looking, like, super happy that she just, like, destroyed this man's life. And it's like, yes, he's
it's for 6 months until he
3 months. It was 3 months, but still.
That's pretty par for the course.
It's pretty good.
Until
but,
you
like,
regroup and get your act together.
But you shouldn't be happy that, like, it was obvious that Miranda was going to get the rights, but to be all smug and happy that this guy's, like, crying in court, like, he was practically crying, and she was like,
I mean, he really screwed up.
He did, but still, like, you can tell this guy is devastated and really, really does love his kids. I did feel a little for him in that scene because it's like the lawyer was being super smug. I didn't like that.
He's a big screw up. I mean, like, he went with his convictions, not supporting smoking, but that's it.
Right.
Other than that, no.
I did feel for him a couple times throughout the movie, so, you know, he goes and meets this liaison, and she sets him up with a job. Do you have any skills? And he, like, makes all these jokes, and she's not impressed, and then they have the first time with the kids are over
You can do
at
a
his
great
apartment.
impression of a
The
hot dog.
Yeah, that was really good, and he just goes, like, limp or stiff in the chair. But the kids are over at his apartment, and they're having, like, Chinese food.
Can we segue on his apartment for a second?
Yes.
Miranda walks into his apartment. This is, like, the first time she's seen it, and she looks around like this is the biggest
Pigsty.
poop hole. It's the biggest poop hole of an apartment. Like, it's revolting, it's disgusting, it's unlivable. Looking at that apartment, like, even in the condition it's in, that would go for like
$5,000.
at least $5,000 in San Francisco, plus probably another $500 for a parking space. Like, that is a nice apartment.
The apartment itself was nice. It was just like, well, and the thing that I thought going into this movie, I thought this took place over several months. We find out at the end of the movie, it only takes place in a month.
Right.
So the fact that he does all this in a month is actually really, really impressive.
Because he finally had the motivation of a decent human being.
Right, but he learns how to cook, sew, clean, all these things. But, like, she comes in one time where clearly he must have just moved in. Like,
right.
And the kids say, this is our first time here.
Right.
So he'd been there for, like, a week, and she's upset that, like, he isn't completely unpacked and everything
and they were
like that.
both, like, super rude and petty to each other the entire time. So, like, here's something I don't understand. Her asking for a divorce was obviously a big shock to him.
Right.
And before, like, she obviously was conflicted about it because she loved him, cared for him, but it wasn't working. And
she seemed shocked when she asked for it.
She did. It was like, obviously them being together was detrimental to their children and their well-being.
Right.
So that's, like, kind of where she was coming from. For her to immediately be treating him like garbage and him to be treating her like garbage, like, I kind of understand coming from him a little bit more.
Just because he's being attacked and he feels
but
slighted.
they were both total jerks to each other in front of their kids.
Well, before she even gets there, so she shows up an hour early to pick up the kids, and she was an hour late dropping them off, which that's not okay.
No,
like,
not
you're
at
setting
all.
a precedent, and you're showing your kids not to respect the
Plus,
law.
if you're going to take him to court for custody, you need to be respecting the court order.
You're right, because then you're showing that you're not living up to it. So he says something about wishing the mom would get dysentery, and then, like, the brother describes in great detail what dysentery is, and the little girl, played by Mara Wilson, is, like, super shocked. Why would you say that, Dad? Which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, it's super messed up that, you know,
she doesn't even,
she didn't
like,
respect
knock.
him
Well,
at all.
she honks down in the street, and then she just barges in.
Right. And then, like, that does come back later, like, towards the 2/3 of the way through the movie, when he's kind of got his life together. He says he has 2 jobs. Obviously, one of them is being Mrs. Doubtfire, and the other one is working at that TV studio doing a bunch of stuff. And
But the court asks for pay stubs.
Right.
So that's kind of odd.
I mean, if she was paying cash. Because he just said he was cleaning houses.
The court wouldn't accept anything that was under the table, so
maybe
that wouldn't technically contribute to his file.
Right, but he still had that other job, and that other job alone was enough to get the apartment, apparently. So I think he's probably
because in the 90s,
fine.
people could actually, like, afford to pay rent.
Right.
San Francisco is dead to us. So Pierce Brosnan looking pretty fine in this movie.
Yeah,
I think this was peak Brosnan.
This was pre-GoldenEye Brosnan by, like, 2 years.
Yeah, so he plays Stu, which was an old college classmate of Miranda's.
And former boyfriend.
Lover. And he meets her and is immediately thirsty AF.
Yeah, he was, but then he also was like, I'll give you time to, like, she explains the situation, and then she seems very interested. And honestly, this time around, I felt bad for him. He was genuinely a good guy.
He was a good guy, but he wasn't really a believable character. He's been pining for Miranda this whole time. He takes a chance and looks her up and is immediately like, let's go out. Finds out she has 3 kids and is going through divorce, and he's still all in.
I think he's
looking at it. He's a little mentally unstable.
He explains it to a friend. I'm sure there's probably some, like, cutscenes, but he explains it.
His
like,
biological clock is
he's
ticking.
like, I'm getting older. I don't want to be alone. Here's this woman that I had these immense feelings for in the past who's available.
Right.
I'm going to leap, like,
I just think he would have cooled down a little bit after meeting the housekeeper, who obviously hates his guts.
Right.
And hearing about the cluster that her life is.
Right. But I agree. I think, he says he's pushing 40s, and let's be real, people in their late 30s, 40s, they don't mess around. Like, they go on a date and they're like, are we going to do this? Like, they don't go 3-4 dates to see how it is. Like, they have a date, and if they're interested, they keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And like, people who are older just move a lot faster, and if he's really into her, I kind of get it. But he's great to the kids. He takes them to the swimming pool. He gets them gifts. He buys random gifts. He genuinely seems to be super attached to these kids, and the kids like him. It's super messed up that Robin Williams' character's Daniel, as Mrs. Doubtfire, poisons him. Well, doesn't poison him.
He
essentially
tries
poisons
to kill him.
So he says
he knows
he's
he has
allergic.
an allergy. Like, he tried to kill him.
Right.
If he had died, that would be manslaughter.
Right. It totally would have been.
Maybe worse.
Yeah, so he did not deserve that. He also vandalizes his car. Like, he yanks the
right,
hood
the
ornament
Mercedes thing.
and throws the fruit at him. The run-by fruiting.
Like, honestly, in real life, he would be serving jail time.
Right, totally. He did fraud.
It's wrong on so many levels.
Right.
It's entirely implausible, and yet I still love this movie.
Oh, it's great.
What scenes stood out to you?
I really like the scene where Miranda goes to Mrs. Doubtfire, and Mrs. Doubtfire's husband got hit by a Guinness truck. She says, how did Mr. Doubtfire pass? And he goes, the drink took him. He's like, oh, he's an alcoholic.
Here's the thing, though. As Mrs. Doubtfire, he really, paints himself into corners unnecessarily a lot of the time. So, he makes up these ridiculous, far-fetched stories on the fly, which I can understand. Some people are not good at thinking on their feet. But then...
he is, because he comes up with these things, and he's able to do these impressions.
But then there's this scene where Miranda says, oh, will you come with us? Stu wants to bring you with us for my birthday dinner at Bridges, which is the restaurant that... what's his character?
Lundy.
No. Daniel. Which is the restaurant that Daniel's supposed to meet his boss at to discuss this amazing career opportunity. It's happening at the same time, the same night, same restaurant. Why didn't Mrs.
Classic 2-date scenario.
But Mrs. Doubtfire could have just been like, I'm busy, sorry.
Well, she said she was busy, but...
He should have fought harder as Mrs. Doubtfire to be like, can't do it. Because Miranda doesn't own her. She's under no obligation to be there constant. Yeah. And he that was a great opportunity for him to be there and kind of spy on them incognito and do his thing. Instead, he shot that horse in the face for no reason.
So his excuse was, it's my turn to pull the balls at bingo. But if he was smart, I have an old friend from London who's only in town for 2 days and I can't, that would have been a better kind of excuse. I agree.
Granted, it made for a very entertaining scene.
Right. And that whole scene is, every sitcom has done that at some point where the 2 dates and they move back and forth. And this was done really well. And, it finally gets blown when he accidentally goes to his boss, Lundy, as Mrs. Doubtfire. And then he has to be like, oh, that's my character. But then Stu starts to choke because he almost killed him with pepper. And so he has to do the Heimlich, and that's how he discovered it. And that line, I didn't remember it, but the whole time? The whole time?
Because she's you see it running through her mind, all the crap that she talked to him about.
Well, and the thing is, he's super manipulative. So, kind of getting back to the scene I was kind of talking about when she talks about her late husband getting killed by the drink, getting run over by a Guinness truck.
Right.
She asks, Miranda asks, hey, when did you have the desire to be with another man again? And he's like, never. Once the husband of your children is no longer in the picture, absolute celibacy is the only way. And then, there's another scene where she's picking clothing out, and one's this really nice red dress that's, really pretty, and then there's this, not, this little black dress, the classic little black dress, and he's like, you look like a harlot, and you look easy, and,
Here's the thing, though.
Shames her.
Some of the stuff that Miranda was talking to Mrs. Doubtfire about was totally inappropriate for...
a boss employee.
You get close when someone's working in your home, but, after a month, you're not talking about that stuff. Especially with, a 70-year-old... Irish woman.
Right. And that's the thing that's weird is, you're right, when you look at things the
especially
nanny...
because, Miranda's background is such a reserved kind of environment.
Right. If you look at The Nanny and Frasier, they have both of those have somebody who's kind of
Hey,
like the help.
Daphne's special.
Right. But, you know, initially they do have those boundaries, and then those boundaries get broken. You're right. Like, I honestly
But not
thought this
after a
movie was 6 months or so. I didn't
Right.
realize it was only 30
I mean,
days.
that's kind of a lot of makeup and stuff to be wearing for 6 months. Like, he probably spent, I'm guessing he spent like 4 hours in the makeup chair for this film every morning.
Right.
That's just a rough estimate.
Right.
I do love the scene where he shows up. Someone mentioned this on Twitter. He shows up and says, "I need you to make a woman," and his brother's super excited. But they go through all of these looks.
Those are great, though. That
Like,
scene is amazing.
It's a great scene, but like that would have cost hundreds of dollars in makeup and latex and wigs to do
right.
that.
So they do like a Barbara Streisand
It was
kind of
great.
character. They did like an old like Yiddish woman, and then
Over the top Latina.
yeah, a
This
Cuban,
might
a
scare the
Cubano.
children. Cubana.
Cubana. Yeah, Cubano. Well, I mean, he would be a Cubano. But they're really great, and then they sing. The other joke that I was kind of like, it's a little insensitive, is they call his brother Frank's partner
Aunt Jack.
Uncle
Uncle Frank and Aunt Jack.
Yeah,
I had an Uncle Liz and Aunt Jerry, but it was Ulysses and Geraldine.
that makes sense.
I mean, here's the thing, though. I feel like the gay community, especially in San Francisco at the time, a lot more men fell into that stereotypical, really effeminate
Right.
pattern. And I think part of that is like being out and proud and finding their place in the world. So I kind of understand where that flamboyance and that over-the-top stuff comes from. I think you see a lot less of that these
Right.
days. But back then, I don't think that was really that offensive in that community. These days, yes.
Right.
But I don't think it was even offensive to them.
Right, that's obviously that's family.
Right.
But, I mean, can see this day and age, somebody watching this movie for the first time could be offended by that.
Right.
Uh,
But I mean, do we need to examine the deeper patriarchal issue where calling someone an effeminate, just effeminate anything is insulting because we hate women?
it's true. We do.
That's too deep for this.
The other thing that was weird about this movie is, as Mrs. Doubtfire, there's several times in the movie where he hits on women, and that costs us. There's a point where they're like on a bike through the Presidio, which we haven't said it, but this movie really made me miss San Francisco.
I know.
But they're on a bike ride in the Presidio, and he almost crashes because he does like a double take to stare at this woman.
That was Chrissy Field.
It's right by the Presidio.
No, it's not.
It's pretty close.
No, it's not. It's like 2 miles.
No, it's not.
A mile and a half.
Not even.
It's,
You're crazy.
Chrissy Field is not the Presidio.
It's right by it.
It's
They
not the
basically
Presidio.
connect. Anyway. Then he also, at the poolside bar, there's this woman who comes up in this like bathing suit, and he tries to buy her a drink, and he's like, "It's on me."
I love that she's like the stereotypical 90s version of hot.
Right. Flat 90s butt.
That flat 90s butt and the high cut bikini.
Right. And he does that throughout, and there's a bunch of times where, like, there's one time somebody tries to mug him, and he's like, "Back off!" in his like man voice. And
Right.
Stu's friend, like the guy who is kind of like, "What are you doing with these 3 kids?" And he explains like, "Oh, I really like the woman, I really like the kids, and I want to settle down." He leaves, and then the friend's still sitting at the bar, and Daniel, as Mrs. Doubtfire, still at the bar, and then he says something in his voice, and the friend looks weird at him. Like, that friend would go and tell Stu that Mrs. Doubtfire's a man. Like, there's no way. If he's concerned enough to, like, about his well-being, like, and settling down, he's gonna tell his friend, "Dude,
Right.
that nanny's a man."
So the kids actually, the 2 older kids, discover...
About halfway through.
Yeah, about halfway through. This is also a really problematic scene because the son walks in on Mrs. Doubtfire peeing, standing up, and runs out and is like, he's a she. And the daughter immediately, like, grabs a weapon. It's
the
like...
tennis racket.
It's... I mean, like, as a kid, yeah, that's terrifying. But to, like, put that in a movie and create this, like, paranoia that trans women are gonna rape you or do something
Right.
untoward it's really problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's a sign of the times.
towards the end of the movie, so the big job opportunity that Robin Williams' character had was he was just like a warehouse guy at a TV studio, and one night he's like playing with the toys on a science show kind of thing, and the owner of the station sees him and decides, hey, I'm going to give you a shot, pitch me a couple, TV shows. And so he ultimately gets a TV show as Mrs. Doubtfire.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because the family leaves the TV on while they're interviewing a bunch of other nannies.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all terrible. And then they go and find out. And then Miranda's like, we can't get rid of Mrs. Doubtfire. So she goes and talks to Daniel. And they have a fight. But then the fight is over pretty quick. And she goes, you can have the kids on the weekdays. And it all resolves itself. And it kind of ends happily.
She's very generous with him.
Very, very generous. And I get it. He put in the effort. And it was still super messed up. But yeah, it's weird. I loved the movie. Don't get me wrong. I had a blast watching it, but I do feel a lot more conflicted about it watching it kind of critically.
Yeah. I think if we're not taking notes though, we'll enjoy it just as much as we ever did.
Still
there's
there's
so many great scenes, like the scene of him switching between himself and Mrs. Doubtfire when the inspector comes to look at his apartment. And the face and the cake thing, that's such a classic thing. There are just so many great moments. It's solid comedy from beginning to end, and it's so well executed. Yeah, it's fantastic. The one thing that I think all of us did because of this movie was abuse our vacuum cleaners.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Kind of push it out in front of you and then pull it back by the cord. Probably every single parent in the country was annoyed by this movie.
I did have one other major problem with this movie.
What?
I understand that he's getting less of a parental role because he doesn't have custody.
Mm-hmm.
But I think obviously we don't have kids, but I'd like to think that if you and I had kids and somehow ended up divorced, which would never happen, but if it did happen, before hiring a nanny, you would let me be involved in that process.
Right, and I might also do a background check.
Right. Well, in the 90s,
make
that was
sure
a
this
little
is a
trickier.
real person.
Back in the 80s and 90s is a lot easier to...
I think people would have gotten someone through an agency if they were Miranda.
Yeah, she probably would have, but Mrs. Doubtfire never meets Daniel. Now, obviously, they're the same person, but what kind of parent wouldn't let the other parent at least meet this person, be part of the interview process?
Right.
That's kind of weird.
It is weird, but at the same time, she has custody, so legally she really doesn't have to do anything.
She doesn't have to, but
it's messed up.
It's totally messed up. I do think if they were to so they were going to make a sequel to this movie, and they had several iterations, and then unfortunately Robin Williams passed, and obviously it was not going to happen. But if they were to reboot this movie, I have a few changes that I would make. So, I think it's such a big stretch for someone to go from being a slob and a loving parent that the kids loved because he was more of a friend than a parent, to being this really stern, nanny. So the first scene that they're with her, the first day that they're alone with her, she makes them do their homework and makes them do chores. It's
because he's a master manipulator, and that's
right.
exactly what Miranda wanted.
Right. So the problem, it's a little strange that he was able to do that so quickly, but if I were to rewrite this movie, what I would have done is he does the little thing with the crank calls, and she goes to him man, I got all these psychos and weirdos and people calling. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find a nanny. And then he makes one final effort, if you're having trouble, let me in, let me help them, I'll do it. And then she still says no. And then he decides to get desperate and come up with the Mrs. Doubtfire character. I think that would have been a little bit more of a believable arc. That would be one thing that I would do if I rewrote this movie.
I would not rewrite this movie. It's a gem, and I love it the way it is.
It's a great movie. I had a blast watching it. It definitely holds
There's just so many good moments. And Sally Field is such an excellent actress.
Oh, she's great.
She took a character who could easily have been really not very interesting
and
at all.
Unlikable.
Yeah, very unlikable, and she gave her so much life, and she's just a great actress.
And she was well-grounded, and you understood where she was coming from. And
right.
Even her character had growth. There's a scene where the first time Mrs. Doubtfire meets the kids, she says something about the parent. The kids say something about the mom being mean to the dad, and Mrs. Doubtfire is like, "You shouldn't talk to your mother like that. That's inappropriate." And then Miranda says something negative about Daniel, and Mrs. Doubtfire goes to Miranda and goes, "I know this is fresh, but you would never badmouth the other parent in front of your kids. Of course you would, take that into another room," kind of thing. And she kind of taught Miranda lessons like, hey, even though you're not getting along with the father, you still need to respect him.
Right.
And I did like that.
Yeah.
So,
no, there's just a lot of good moments. Like the scene where his boss walks in on him playing with the dinosaurs, and that's kind of how he gets the idea. I'll be back, but I'm coming back as oil.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, and it's interesting.
I eat wood. No. It tastes good.
Interesting.
No.
I just, this entire movie was warm
Big
fuzzy
feet.
for me.
No meat.
No, it's no meat, big feet.
No.
But I mean, from the very beginning of this movie, I swear to God, I remember all of the lines in this movie.
Did the part at the beginning of the movie with the cartoon that he's doing the voiceover for? You did the whole thing.
I can sing the whole thing,
Which,
but I think that's just because I listened to a lot of opera in
like
college.
the Tweety Bird like knockoff character speaking. Like you did some of the cigarette stuff too, which surprised me.
I know this entire movie because we had it on VHS. It was a great family film. My entire family liked to watch it, so it was on heavy rotation in my house. And it's amazing how even now, feeling completely differently about Daniel's character and his actions, when I watch the scene where he gets found out, I still feel physically ill for him.
I do too.
And I think that's like just how
It's a
strong
testament to how...
the children's memories are of
and
this
movie. And it's a
movie.
testament of how much they did to make you like this character, even though he's doing something
you get
morally
really
wrong.
emotionally invested in this film, and
I agree.
I just love it. I love it. I would watch it again tomorrow.
It's a good movie. I had a blast watching. Definitely my childhood wasn't ruined. I looked at it in a completely different light, but I still enjoyed it.
I do relate a little bit more to Daniel these days. He has this one line where he says, "Do you ever wish you could freeze frame a single moment in your life, look at it and say, this is not my life?"
Right. Yeah.
Every day, Daniel.
And like we didn't even really get into the one-liners, and I'm not gonna like I'll probably make like a supercut or something when I edit this. But there's so many great jokes and one-liners in this movie. Like we wouldn't do them justice even trying to do them.
Right, and now that we were like focusing and trying to watch it, I think we were able to appreciate them even more.
Right, and
because
we
they
noticed so
just
much
fly
more.
under the radar usually.
Like all those dirty jokes.
Oh my
like,
God,
I don't remember those at all.
Yeah.
Well,
that's it for me.
I'm good.
Love this movie. Think it's still fantastic. It's a couple problematic jokes in this day and age,
but pretty mild. Honestly,
pretty mild,
I thought it was going to be a lot
when it
worse.
was made. Yeah,
and it being Robin Williams, who gets pretty raunchy.
Right. So, what are we talking about next time?
So I'm going to give you a choice. So I had the one that I wanted to do. So I wanted to cover The Rocketeer, but our new patron, Jesus, sent me a message asking if we were ever going to do Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
All right. This one's for you, Jesus. We're doing Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
I'm down. So, of course, anybody who's listening, tell us what you think about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Tell us what you remember. You can tweet, comment, DM Katrina or myself on Instagram or Twitter.
That's Katrina Ossity.
And we're MDXpods. Check out her YouTube. It's pretty great. She's got all these DIY stuff.
Oh, stop.
Yeah. And then, of course, check out our other podcast, Remake Rewind. We have a new host. His name is Alex. He's pretty great, so check it out. We're doing some new things on that podcast. And, of course, just check out our website, Twitter, Instagram for daily updates, Facebook. It's all MDXpods. Don't worry about Vero. We're on it, but don't trip.
And that's it. Thanks for listening.
All right. Have a good one, guys.